Alright everybody, hail and welcome to today's episode of Midgard Musings. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching. This is your first time, my name is Jesse and I'm the host here on this channel. I upload new content every week that covers various subjects of Norse heathenry, Northern European Germanic paganism, that sort of thing. Various names of the same thing, kind of umbrella terms to describe this path, okay? So if this is the type of thing that you like and you're new to the channel, I definitely would appreciate if you were to subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to miss anything, make sure that you click the bell notification. That way you are notified every time I upload new content. This channel, we are aggressively seeking 2,000 subscribers before the new year. So by January 1st, 2020, I want to have 2,000 subscribers here, and your help is needed and appreciated. So please like the videos, comment down below, share them around. The more you interact with these videos, the more they get sent out, thanks to the wonderful YouTube algorithm. And also other channels like this will come across in your feed. So if you want to see more stuff like what I do, definitely interact down in the comment section, share them around, all that fun stuff, and you'll see more stuff of this channel and more stuff like this channel. All kinds of other ways down in the description that you can follow to support Midgard Musings. There's a Patreon account now that you can become a patron on. There's merchandise through Teespring's Redbubble. There's the PayPal donation. You can buy me a coffee. I'm also broadcasted on 8 different platforms for podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts through the Anchor.fm platform. So there's all kinds of ways that you can support Midgard Musings out there. Today's discussion is a bit of a hot button topic, or a hot topic, I think, in heathen communities and within heathenry in general. And that is the concept or subject of prayer. How do heathens pray? Do heathens pray? Why should we pray? Is it even something that is a part of our repertoire of, if you want to call religious practices or spiritual practices, okay? So kind of a warning or disclaimer up front, a lot of what you will hear from me on this channel will be a part of the UPG stuff. That is my own view of the world, of heathenry and stuff. I'm not what you would call a hardcore recon heathen, or even a historical heathen at best. I'm sort of middle of the road. I may lean more towards the historical parts of things, but it's definitely not 100% the way I practice heathenry. What works for me works for me. So take that into consideration as you listen and as you watch, that none of this is canon, and you should find how heathenry works for you and practice it in the way that works best for you, okay? So before we get things started, let's go ahead and, before I forget, because last week I forgot to light the candle and light the incense. It's a weekly, tradition here to burn some incense and to burn a candle during the show. So now I reminded myself to do that. Let's get those 2 items out of the way. All right. So got that going. All right. So prayer in heathenry. I think the big thing that comes into consideration when we're talking about prayer is how it's, the meaning of it for folks who maybe have a kind of a preconceived or a predetermined notion about what that means and what it involves from previous religious experiences or from previous paths that you may have walked. We've got a lot of folks kind of like myself who came into heathenry from a Christian background, so a lot of the things that are done within Christianity, you're bleeding things over into heathenry, or you're picking things up along the way, and you're kind of hung up on things from your previous path, perhaps. It happens a lot. It happened for me quite a lot until I got into some more of the worldview of heathenry and how things were perhaps practiced or observed or looked at from an arch-heathen standpoint, pre-Christian Scandinavia, right? And this is one of those things. Prayer is one of those things that I feel has a lot of previous baggage coming along with it. And one of the things that I see happen a lot for folks when it comes to prayer and understanding how it can be applied, or if it can be applied within a heathen context, is that a lot of folks will come into this thing and they love the feeling of we are our own people, we are our own individuals, we practice on our own path, there is no dogma, there's nothing that is canon in terms of instructions of whatever how to do. A lot of the ways that heathenry is practiced is kind of picked up and established by the traditions of a certain region. So those traditions are different based on geography, okay? Customs of a people from a certain time or era or location or combination of all those things. And prayer being one of those things where, at least within a Christian background approach, in that path, prayer is like you are throwing yourself at the mercy of your supreme God or deity, and you are asking for something to happen because you cannot do it yourself or you feel weak. And within the heathen context, I see a lot of people coming into this path going, well, I love the fact that I can talk to my gods as they are equals, and that we are kind of on the same level. I stand with my gods. I don't kneel. I walk with my gods. I don't bow myself to them. I'm not subservient to them. I serve this path, and I walk this path as a service to my folk and to myself and to the people around me, and that I'm not, I don't owe the gods anything. I don't need to ask them for anything, that sort of stuff. So there's this big, kind of a machismo attitude about heathenry. And one thing I want to, kind of clarify about the practice, at least the way I practice heathenry, is that yes, we are working our own fates. We are, or not working our own fates, but we are living our own lives, and we are walking our own paths. And the fate that is sort of there for us, we're going to be talking about fate a little bit in this video later on, is certain things that we certainly cannot, change, but that we are working the weird, that web. We are working things ourselves along the way to kind of bring about a certain outcome. So praying for something in the sense of asking for the gods or for anybody or anything else to do something for us other than ourselves seems a bit foreign and seems a bit out of place. Now, the way I view prayer, okay, is that prayer is the inner reflection of an outward worship or veneration. All right, it's the foundation of the spiritual impetus that leads to things about what a practicing heathen does. The feignings, the bloat, the ritual, all this type of stuff. These rites, okay, these actions, these deeds, things like bloat and other various rituals, they're based around the concept of spiritual reciprocity, that gift for a gift. Okay, we've talked about this a lot on the channel about the importance of sacrifice. I actually did a video about sacrifice and the nature of sacrifice and what it means in a modern heathen context and where it kind of comes from, but you can check that out in an annotated card that's going to be up here in the top right of your screen. But that gift for a gift, the giving of something to gain something or to receive something, that is a central part of the heathen culture. At a large thing, if you could say that one particular thing was universal in terms of heathenry, it is that. How you do it, what you do, can be different based on tribe to tribe, kindred to kindred, individual to individual, but that basic element of gift for gift, that reciprocity, is always there. And it's the way that we do it, through the physical gifting of things like libations, alcohol, blood, even the sacrifices that you give, whether they be votive gifts. It's all kind of the same way. So through prayer, we're able to give the intent, the time, and the gift of an open and willing self, and our open and willing heart, if you will. Okay, we're able to verbalize and give the intent of what it is that we're doing. So it's not that we're approaching our deities or our higher powers in a sense of asking them for something that we ourselves are not willing to do for ourselves or haven't done for ourselves. It's a different sort of thing. It's not the same understanding of what prayer is in a Christian context, right? For folks that approach this with a very historical element involved, or the more historical recon heathens, you could argue the fact that in their mind and in folks' minds like that, prayer is more of an act of drawing attention to oneself than submitting yourselves to the deities, because we're not like throwing ourselves at the mercy of the gods or anything like that. That's not how the world was viewed largely from an arch-heathen standpoint. But again, it's drawing attention to ourselves. Notice me, see me, hear me, what I'm saying, what I'm doing to bring about this certain action or this certain change, right? Now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the sources, some of the poems that exist, some of the texts that we have that exist that back up a approach to prayer, or at least give some sort of allusion to that existing in arch-heathen times, and at least up to the Viking Age, when things started to become a bit more Christianized, right? One of those sources for Norse Germanic heathens, at least, anyways, and again, there's a lot of different approaches that you can take to heathenry. You have those the Anglo-Saxon type heathens that may have other sources that they look to, things like the Highland and the Beowulf and other things of that nature. But for Norse Germanic heathens, I'm going to be citing a couple of things, and one of them being is from the Poetic Edda, all right, which is a compilation of stories and about the Norse gods and the myths that surround their various things. And then we got some other stories. One of those poems that is contained in the Poetic Edda is a poem called Sigdrifamal. All right. Now there's two stanzas in that poem that are often interpreted as being a prayer, and I'm going to read to you now from Sigdrifamal, and it's stanzas 3 and 4. And I can't remember the version or the translation that I'm reading from, but as far as linguistics goes, you may get different things from different translations. All right. So that poem contains a couple of stanzas which say, "Hail to the gods, you goddesses, hail, and all the generous earth. Give to us wisdom and good speech, and healing hands while we live. Long did I sleep, my sleep was long, and long are the griefs of life. Odin decreed that I could not break the heavy spells of sleep." And again, there is a debate whether or not this is even a prayer of sorts, but again, we see a hailing, an invocation being performed, something to call and draw the attention of the certainty. Hail the gods, hail the goddesses. This is an invocation. This is how the prayer starts, if you want to call it such. And there are certain other things that become a part of or include that prayer, or what the structure of a prayer is. You're invoking the gods, you're naming the deities that you wish to invoke, and then saying the things that you want. Like it says, give to us, wisdom and good speech, and healing hands. So you're maybe petitioning or something of them as you want to, make yourself known to them, that sort of thing. So again, it's whether or not this is a quote prayer, that's up for debate. All right, another source, which is the documentations of Ibn Fadlan. All right, he was an Islamic Arab traveler who spent time around the Swedish Vikings called the Rus, and the book, the source of his documentations is called Ibn Fadlan in the Land of Darkness, I believe it's called, and you can probably find that on Amazon or whatever your books sources that you go to for your various literary needs. Check out that book, Ibn Fadlan in the Land of Darkness. And in his account of his experiencing or being a part of witnessing, anyways, the funeral of one of the Drytons or chieftains of the Rus, a slave girl was present, and she was about to become a sacrifice to join this chieftain. She was his slave, and she was being sacrificed along after his death to kind of accompany him in his journey to, at least from the sources say, in his journey to Valhalla, right? Now, what the slave's statement is, as documented by Ibn Fadlan, is, you know, many will see this as some sort of a prayer, which again is also debatable. So here it is. She says, or from Ibn Fadlan, he says, I quizzed the interpreter about her actions, and he said, the first time they lifted her, she said, behold, I see my father and my mother. The second time she said, behold, I see all of my dead kindred seated. The third time she said, behold, I see my master seated in paradise. I see paradise is beautiful and verdant. He is accompanied by his men and his male slaves. He summons me, so bring me to him. If you've ever watched the movie The 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas, and you will see a graphic appear online. I'll try to include the text somewhere here on the screen for you to see what the interpretation, the Hollywoodized version of that. You will see a lot of stuff come up with Viking prayer graphics. If you search Viking prayer online, you will see something that says something like this, or even verbatim like this. Again, whether or not that's a prayer or not, that's literally what Ibn Fadlan documented as the interpreter saying that she said prior to her being killed as the sacrifice to accompany her her chieftain to the afterlife. All right, and then finally, one of the greatest sources that we have is Tacitus Germania. In his famous passages on Germanic divination, he says that for divination and casting of lots, they have the highest regard. He's speaking of now the Germanic tribes that existed around this time. And I believe this was like somewhere around the first or second century or something. It's pretty early on. So for the accuracy of things, I may go back and annotate along this video when that text came out. So, but anyway, for divination and casting of lots, they have the highest regard. Their procedure in casting lots is always the same. They cut off a branch of a nut-bearing tree and slice it into strips. These they carve with different signs and throw them completely at random onto a white cloth. Then the priest of the state, if the consultation is a public one, or the father of the family, if it is a private, offers a prayer to the gods, and looking up at the sky, picks up 3 strips, one at a time, and reads their meaning from the signs previously carved on them. If the lots forbid an enterprise, there is no deliberation that day on the matter in question. If they allow it, confirmation by the taking of auspices is required. So this is a historical or reciting of what was done in terms of runic divination. Okay, this is where we kind of get the backing of casting runes from. And even though Tacitus, okay, he wasn't necessarily an eyewitness to this deed, he wrote what the Roman soldiers attested to in their own eyewitness accounts. So it's kind of a, secondhand recollection of things. But given the fact, okay, or despite that fact, even though he wasn't an eyewitness to it, I don't think that there's any reason to believe that this was inaccurate or written down in error. Okay, I do believe that this is an accurate testimony of the way things, that the way the Germanic tribes did things, and that a prayer to the gods was definitely incorporated and done in this sort of a divination ritual. All right, so now what was said isn't obviously documented, but there was something said. What it was called, and it was recognized by Tacitus at the time as being a prayer. Okay. Now, there's some of your historical sources of the fact that yes, prayer existed within heathen tribes, within non-Christian existences of people living in Northern Europe and Germania at the time. Now, in terms of what we do today as modern heathens, I like to just say right off the bat, how you pray, what you say, how you do it, the meaning behind it, how you choose to do this, if at all, is definitely your own prerogative. Okay, this is again where the UPG part of things comes in. We don't necessarily know of anything specific in the lore or in the poems or in the sources that say this was a prayer of how heathens did it and what it was for. We just hear various, sort of allusions to the fact that this is something that was done, and we since then have kind of come up with the idea of a prayer being, insinuated, right? So another thing is your posture, where you do it, how you do it, that sort of thing. A lot of folks, as I will see, like I mentioned earlier in the video, that kneeling is not something that is, we as heathens do because we are not kneeling to the gods. Look, there is historical evidence that kneeling was done, and that even full-on prostration, laying down in front of the god poles and whatnot, that these are things that happened, that were witnessed and seen by others, even Fadlan being one of them. That this sort of submission to the deity is historically accurate. So if you want to kneel to your altar, to your god poles, to your idols, to your god figures, what have you, if you want to give yourself some form of submission, then you are not out of line by doing so. This is something that is historically done, and for that matter, I feel like it's totally appropriate, because I look at it this way, guys. If you were living in these times and you were a thrall, or you were a subject to the king of a realm or of an area, or even your chieftain, if you were a subject to the chieftain of your tribe, to kneel to that person, to bow your head in subjection, in a form of respect and venerance, that is 100% and totally fine. So why would it not be fine, and why not should we do that then with our gods, who are spiritual deities? They are above us on the spiritual level. We exist in the profane, they exist in the sacred. So to do that sort of action, to have that sort of approach to the gods, if you want to do it, don't feel like you are not being a heathen, okay, if you do that. That's up to you. It's not my word, it's not anybody else's word. If you want to do it, that's fine. Don't feel like you are less of a heathen for doing it. If you're so inclined, go right ahead. So it does seem, like I said, prayer in the sense of asking the gods for something, it seems to be a pretty rare thing in the surviving sources, and in the surviving poetry, and in the surviving documents and texts that we have. You could say that it was possibly due to the fact that in Germanic tribes, the Indo-European cultures that kind of came from, that originated where the Viking class and all these other ancient societies came from, due to that Germanic concept of fate that we talked about earlier, the fact that fate is set and that there is no way of changing it, even in the Poetic Edda, when Odin consults with the Volva in Voluspa to determine what happens, the fate of the gods, Ragnarok, all that stuff, he still tries to change his fate. He cannot change it. None of us can. Our fate is set. And in that aspect, what we do along the way to meet that fate is entirely up to us. We can't expect divine intervention. That's not something I think that myself or any other heathens necessarily feel, that there is no divine intervention of changing anything for us just because of whatever. Like, we forge our own paths. We walk this path ourselves. We do things ourselves.